You're listening to the Catholic Wives with Toxic In-Laws podcast. Today's episode is about how to stop saying you're sorry to your toxic in-laws. Are you a Catholic wife grappling with challenging in-laws? The Catholic Wives with Toxic In-Laws podcast is your sanctuary for navigating the sometimes stormy seas of life with toxic in-laws while being validated for what you've experienced. Join me, your host, Miriam Susan, a Catholic wife who's weathered 3 decades of in-law drama, as we tackle the tough issues you're dealing with head on. Hi, I'm Miriam Susan. I am your host for this podcast, and I just want to stop and say thank you. Thank you so much for being here, for tuning in. This is our 90th episode, and it's so funny because my son tonight, we were driving in the car, and he said, "Mommy, that's kind of a big milestone. What are you going to do?" And I was like, "I don't know, but I plan to do something special as we count down to 100 episodes." So thank you for sticking with me for almost 100 episodes, 90 so far. And today we're going to talk about this topic of saying you're sorry to your toxic in-laws. And the scripture reference for this episode is from the book of Proverbs, chapter 29, verse 25. And this is from the New Revised Standard Version, Catholic edition. And it says, "The fear of others lays a snare, but one who trusts in the Lord is secure." I want you to think about this scenario, and maybe it is a very common scenario or one that you can easily relate to. And that is, you're at Sunday dinner, and you're at your in-laws' house, and your mother-in-law makes kind of a not-so-nice comment about how the kids seem tired and cranky. And you immediately say, "I'm sorry," even though this is a normal thing for this time of day for your kids. Nothing has changed in their routine. You haven't done anything wrong, but your immediate instinct is to say, "I'm sorry." Or you text your father-in-law and you tell him, "I'm so sorry, we can't make it to the family gathering this weekend." But honestly, you're kind of relieved to have a quiet weekend at home. So when did saying, "I'm sorry," become your default response to everything? So we need to think about that, right? We need to be careful. We need to be attentive to the words that we use. In the words of my 10th grade English teacher, your words have power. And God's words have power. God was able to speak the known and unknown into existence just with his voice. And because we are created in his image, our words also have power. So we need to start becoming aware of the times when we maybe don't use our words in the wisest way possible. So there's 2 types of toxic apologies that I want to focus on in this episode. And the first one is apologizing for things that you didn't do wrong. Some examples might be saying sorry for your toddlers being toddlers, or saying sorry for having a boundary. Like, "I'm sorry that we can't have you over today." That's not really something you probably need to apologize for. Yet we apologize also for not being available 24/7 for anybody. And we apologize for having different parenting choices than maybe our in-laws would like us to have. And what this does is when we say we're sorry for things that we didn't do wrong, is it sends a message to our toxic in-laws, "You're right to be upset with me. I am doing something wrong." But what it really does is it reinforces their belief that you are the problem. And it kind of reinforces that belief within ourselves, because if we keep saying, "I'm sorry for, the kids screaming. I'm sorry that they were running. I'm sorry that I can't answer the phone at 3:00 in the morning when you text me." When we do that, we're not only reinforcing the belief to our in-laws that we're the problem, but we start to reinforce that belief within ourselves. Now, the second type of toxic apologies is apologizing for things you're not actually sorry for. Sorry we can't make it, when you're actually glad that you have other plans. Or sorry the kids can't sleep over, when it's probably better for everyone if they don't. or sorry, I can't help with that, when you are just making a decision to protect your time and your energy. Now, this, my friends, is lying, because you are pretending to have a certain level of remorse that you don't actually feel. And I'm just going to let that kind of hang there for a little bit. When we say we're sorry for things that we are not sorry for, we are not telling the truth. We are lying. Sometimes lying to the other people, sometimes lying to ourselves, but we are performing an emotion in order to avoid conflict. We need to really think about that. If saying I'm sorry is a default answer for you, I would encourage you to seek out what the Lord would have you to do in prayer, because it's like the littlest thing in the grand scheme of things we think, but it can actually get us into a lot of trouble. So why do we say this? Why do we say we're sorry when we're not, or we apologize for things that we didn't do wrong? Well, chances are that we have been taught, or has been modeled to us, that being a good Catholic, being a good wife, being a good person means being agreeable, keeping the peace, and then we confuse being sorry with being polite. And as far as I can tell, being polite is not something that we are necessarily called to do. We're not called to be rude, but we're not called to be polite in such a way that we don't tell the truth. If you've been listening to this podcast thinking, finally, somebody gets it, well, I have got something for you. I just launched a brand new community called Catholic Wives Plus Toxic In-Laws, and it's exactly what it sounds like, a place where you can finally talk honestly about your in-law struggles without being told to just pray more or just let it go. This isn't another course that you have to complete. It's a community of women who will believe your story, who will validate your experience, and help you find peace without compromising your Catholic faith. So if you're tired of carrying this heavy, heavy burden alone, go to toxicinlaws.com and join us. Your peace is waiting inside. We have also this fear of being seen as the difficult one, the selfish one, the bad guy, the villain. And so we'd rather fake remorse by saying we're sorry than to deal with our toxic in-laws' disappointment or anger. When we look back at the scripture for today from Proverbs, the fear of others lays a snare. It's that fear. We're afraid of somebody else's opinion more so than we are committed to telling the truth. When we say we're sorry because we don't want to disappoint somebody, that is a fear of others, a fear of disappointing somebody else. But as this proverb says, the fear of others lays a snare, but one who trusts in the Lord is secure. We can speak the truth in love with a clear conscience. And yes, we want to say things in a charitable way. Yes, we want to use gentleness with our words, but we need to be very careful about saying, I'm sorry, when we aren't. What is saying I'm sorry really costing you? Well, partly it costs you your credibility, because when you apologize for everything, your apologies mean nothing when you actually are wrong and you are sincere. It's kind of like the story about the little boy who cried wolf. You say it over and over and over again when you don't really mean it, and then when you actually need to say it, it doesn't hold as much weight. Now, it also costs a little bit of our authority as a mother, because if our kids are watching us apologize for things that aren't wrong, what does that teach them? It teaches them that we need to say, I'm sorry, when we feel like we might hurt somebody's feelings, even though we haven't done anything wrong. And that is not what we want for our children. We want our children to grow up and feel secure in stating the truth, right? It also can cost you your peace, because every false apology that we make is us betraying ourselves and then our marriages. Your husband is going to have a hard time defending you or seeing the problem when you keep taking responsibility for things that aren't your fault. So if your mother-in-law gets upset because you've decided that you don't want to go to her house for Thanksgiving this year, you would rather host it at yours and have a smaller crowd, or just have foods that you know your family can eat. Maybe she doesn't cook what your family can eat, and that's a big fight. And so you say, I'm sorry, we can't be there for Thanksgiving this year, when really you're not. When your husband is, confronted with this, he hears that you have said, I'm sorry, but you're really not. That's hard for him to defend you because you haven't been truthful with your reasoning behind maybe not going to certain family events. One other thing is that you are teaching your in-laws that your needs, your decisions, your family's well-being should always come with an apology attached. And that shouldn't be the case. We shouldn't have to apologize for wanting some space. We shouldn't have to apologize for needing a nap if we are pregnant and exhausted, or if we have a newborn or a toddler who has not been sleeping through the night. We shouldn't have to apologize for that. Let me offer you a suggestion on a mental shift to consider. Not every no answer requires an apology. And this is a hard shift to make. I am not one who tends to say I'm sorry very often. It has been something that I've had to train myself to do. Like I said, it's not something that I naturally defaulted to, but I did do it at times. And to just make this shift to say, instead of, I'm sorry, we won't be able to make it, you can just say, we won't be able to make it. There's no apology needed. It's a complete sentence. So I want you to think, what if you only apologized when you were actually sorry? And this isn't about being rude. It's about being honest, because your feelings matter, even the ones that don't include guilt. It's hard, yes, but I think it's important. I think it's just a subtle nuance, a subtle thing that we can begin to improve today that can improve our lives by not apologizing for every little thing. You don't have to have the words, I'm sorry, in front of every single reason why you can't do something. You can just say, we won't be able to make it. That's not going to work for our family. In fact, just this summer, my son got an invitation to a birthday party. And this is somebody that we've just met casually. We don't really know the family very well. And I asked him if he wanted to go. And he said he didn't, that he wasn't really close to this child, and he just didn't really want to go to the party. So I did not apologize when I replied to this boy's mom over text. I just said, we're going to have to pass, but we appreciate you thinking of us. And both of those things were true. We were going to have to pass. I didn't give her a reason. I didn't tell her it's because my son didn't want to go, because that would hurt her feelings. That would hurt our son's feelings, and that's not our intent. But I still wanted to give my son that option to make that choice. I'm not going to force him to go to a birthday party he doesn't want to go to. And so I was able to say, we're going to have to pass. That was true. We were going to have to pass because my son didn't want to go. And I appreciated them thinking of us, because it is something that I was appreciative of. I was thankful that her son thought of our son and wanted to invite him to this party. So it takes some time to get out of the habit of saying, I'm sorry, but you absolutely can do it. I think it might be easier for those of us who like to think before we speak versus, those of you who just speak and don't necessarily think about what you're going to say before you say it. But I think it's something that we should all consider, because we can't build healthy boundaries while constantly apologizing for having them. The disappointment that your toxic in-laws have with your choices isn't something that you have done wrong. You've done nothing wrong by deciding to do things differently from your in-laws or from your parents or from your siblings. You haven't. So the next time that you feel that I'm sorry rising up into your throat, I would like for you to just pause and ask yourself, am I actually sorry, or am I just afraid of disappointing somebody? Because trusting the Lord means trusting that you don't have to lie about your feelings to keep the peace. So I'm going to issue a little challenge, and I want you to notice this week how many times you say, I'm sorry, to your in-laws or to anybody else, and then ask yourself if you actually meant it. God bless you. Go in peace. Thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode. If you've ever wondered just how toxic your relationship with your in-laws really is, I've got the perfect tool for you. Introducing the new free Toxic In-Laws Assessment, a self-graded quiz designed to help you identify the true level of toxicity in your relationship with your in-laws. Whether you're unsure if your in-laws are really that bad, or you think they might be worse than you realize, this assessment will give you the clarity you need. Don't leave it to guesswork. Take the free Toxic In-Laws Assessment now and start your journey towards healthier and more peaceful family dynamics. Visit desiringpeace.com/quiz to get started. Disclaimer. All content and information on this podcast and our website, including our programs, products, and or services, is for information and educational purposes only and does not constitute professional medical, psychiatric, or mental health advice of any kind, and does not establish any kind of professional client relationship by your listening to this podcast or use of my website. A professional client relationship with you is only formed after we have expressly entered into a written agreement with you that you have signed, including our fee structure and other terms to work with you in a specific matter. Although we strive to provide accurate general information, the information presented here is not a substitute for any kind of professional advice, and you should not rely solely on this information. Always consult a professional in the area for your particular needs and circumstances prior to making any professional, medical, or mental health related decisions.